The penultimate round of this Formula One season comes to Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix. Albert Park has played host to numerous penultimate rounds here in the F1 MyDriver series, and always seems to guarantee some sort of spanner in the works for the drivers involved in the title fight. Antonio Giovinazzi will be hoping he can steer clear of such drama as he looks to try and hold his championship lead going into the final race. Red Bull say they won't have the same advantage they've enjoyed over the last few rounds, and this was seen throughout Friday practice, with Albert Park seeming to level the playing field a little bit. Audi have brought a final aerodynamic update to their car in a bid to give Carlos Sainz the best chance at overturning the 8-point gap he has to Giovinazzi. The German outfit believe they should be a lot stronger around Melbourne, where they can flex their engine power a little more, and hope they can also rectify their slump to P3 in the Constructors. McLaren, meanwhile, are rather unsure how they stack up. In theory, they should have a strong car, but during practice, Ricciardo in particular was finding it tough to extract the maximum time out of the car. Meanwhile, aarava was going slightly better, but with the likes of Jaguar and Porsche also setting decent times, Sunday's Grand Prix could indeed have some surprises in store. Mentioning Jaguar, Van Dorn seemed in quite good spirits in the paddock coming off the back of 2 DNFs in a row. The Belgian seemed to have accepted he can no longer fight for another world championship, but looked happy to just be driving a car that has developed into one of the best all-round cars on the grid. Finally, Renault have brought further updates to their car following a shock no-points finish in Japan, the same race in which their main rivals Aston Martin scored with both drivers. The quiet development race between these two teams has meant BMW now look a lot slower over one lap and could leave them vulnerable to a late challenge in the standings by Mercedes or Porsche. All of this has certainly meant tension is in the air around Melbourne, which is 2 races to go and both championships still very much in play. It's certainly set to be a thrilling end to the season. As the checkered flag fell at the end of Q3 in the land down under, there was a big gap to the big cat at the top of the timing screens as Stoffel Vandoorne snatched pole position by over 0.3 of a second, and he's starting alongside the championship contending Audi of Carlos Sainz, who has one goal to beat Gio and aarava. Speaking of, the Red Bull of Antonio Giovinazzi starts just behind the Spaniard in P3 with his teammate Pierre Gasly alongside him for backup, but both will need a good result if Red Bull want to beat McLaren in the team championship. Just behind the Red Bulls, we find the other championship contender of aarava, who put his McLaren on the 3rd row, 1/100th of a second quicker than the leading Porsche of Pascal Wehrlein. The former Ferrari teammates will once again start side by side as Charles Leclerc put his Mercedes in 7th position, but a 1/10.5 quicker than Mick Schumacher could manage. Row 5's cars will look very similar to Row 4, with George Russell putting his Merc in 9th position alongside the 2nd Ferrari of Max Verstappen, and only 1/1000th of a second separating them at the end of Q3. Starting from just outside the top 10 is the Renault of Esteban Ocon, who will be hoping for a nice haul of points before his season wraps up. He's joined by the other McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo. It was another difficult Saturday for Alexander Albon in the Jag and Lando Norris in the Porsche as well. They'll be starting the race 12 and 8 positions behind their teammates respectively. The other Renault of Christian Lundgaard did make a Q2 appearance, but was slowest at the end of the session. He's joined by the Audi of Vettel, who once again struggled for one-lap pace. Jamie Chadwick put in an impressive lap that was just a few hundredths shy of what Vettel managed. She's joined by the leading BMW of Sergio Perez on row 9. And bringing up the rear this week, it's the other Aston Martin and the other BMW, Ilott in 19th and Aitken in 20th, nearly 2 seconds slower than Stoffel Vandoorne.
Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to the episode of my F1 MyDriver Career Mode Season 9, round number 10 today for the Australian Grand Prix, the penultimate round of this final season of this series. And if it wasn't crunch time already, it very much is now. 2 rounds to go, 1 point between myself and Antonio Giovinazzi. Carlos Sainz still mathematically in with a shout, and he's qualified very well indeed. And of course, this race will set up that final race at the Brazilian Grand Prix next time out. By the way, just so you know, that final episode will be uploaded on Friday of this week instead of the usual Thursday this series has been going out. So on Friday, hopefully at 7 PM, might be a little bit later though, UK time, that final episode will be uploaded. But Here we are then, round 10. Melbourne has always chucked up some late drama in F1 MyDriver. It's kind of almost become a fan favourite, I feel, for the penultimate round. Something seems to always happen around here at Albert Park that can shake things up a little bit and blow the championship wide open just before that final race. And I'm sure maybe this time it won't be any different for us. It'll be maybe a challenging race. You know, our teammate Ricciardo down the order in qualifying. We've qualified pretty okay there. We can see our championship rivals ahead of us of Antonio Giovinazzi and Carlos Sainz on the front row and second row respectively from P5, hoping for a good race. Again, like the last few episodes, tyre wear and strategy will be differing potentially. My plan is going to be a two-stop, knowing the tyre wear will be pretty high in both sets of compounds, the soft and the medium, but we'll just have to see how it goes in the race as we now get towards 5 red lights for the second last round of this season. The Australian Grand Prix down under. Fire lights are out and we're underway. It's a good start for Pierre Gasly on the right. Slow one for Giovinazzi and also the pole sit to Van Dorn as Sainz already into first place at turn 1. The two Red Bulls side by side make some contact and we stick behind in P5. Can we try and get a toe of both of them there? Trying to force our way through on the left hand side. Nearly being pushed onto the grass there by Giovinazzi, but finding the space to work with there. We're now side by side with the Italian. He very quickly backs out as we go through the left-hander. So we're up into P4, then ahead Van Dorn successfully defends from Gasly for second place. But what a start there by the Spaniard, already building a lead in the Audi, looking good and abusing the power he's got in that engine of his. Meanwhile, for second place, it's Gasly versus Van Dorn. Fakes to right, goes to the left-hand side, round the outside, the long way round into turn 1, and he's going to have to get the elbows out on the exit, but no, they're still neck and neck. So a great battle brewing already between Van Dorn and Gasly. Can we try and get involved here as we go through the right-hander, closing up, finding maybe some space to work with as we're now down the inside, up into P3, but Van Dorn gets the elbows out. It's tapped me wide a little bit. We get out the throttle because we would have spanned the car, I think, on the grass and the runoff area, and that's allowed Giovinazzi to nip it back down the inside, and so we find ourselves back in P5 then, just ahead of Pascal Wehrlein in the Porsche, doing a decent job right now, hanging at the back of this pack. And also, to be fair, the kind of entire top 8 are in the world of their own. As you can clearly see, there's a massive gap then afterwards on the mini-map, so something must have gone on lap 1 that we didn't see. But here we come back at Giovinazzi, and look how close that is through the high-speed chicane, pretty much with the piece of paper there between our front 2 tyres as we entered that left-hander. And now it's going to be nearly 3 wide as Wehrlein sends it to the inside there. He's trying his hardest to overtake Giovinazzi, doesn't work out in the end, and so he has to back down, but it's still the same order. Giovinazzi P4, myself P5, Wehrlein P6, but you saw also the other 2 cars of the Mercedes and Ferrari, I think both Mercedes actually, and the Ferrari right behind Wehrlein as well, so you pretty much throw a blanket over all 6 or 5 of us there in that one shot that was at the end of that lap. You can see they're still going on, hammer and tong behind. The 2 Mercedes cars are sandwiching that Ferrari of Mick Schumacher behind. Meanwhile, cutting back to our POV, getting back into slipstream, a little bit on the grass as well. The Red Bulls are really making things difficult for us this afternoon. They're really making the track as wide, or their car as wide as possible, to try and squeeze everyone out. It's either me or Van Dorn, but we're going to hang through this entire sequence of corners and get the job done on Giovinazzi through that right-hander, and we're finally back up into P4. Can we try and maybe now hopefully use the clean air ahead of us to try and catch up to this fight that is still going on between Van Dorn and Gasly, as Van Dorn goes sailing around the outside to get back into P2, but these two seem very equalised on pace. You can see clearly Gasly comes back at him, a very weird panning camera shot we got there for a second there, but good to see, to be fair, with the DRS open as well, of course, for Gasly to get through, and so Van Dorn back down to P3, but all whilst these guys are fighting, this man is just getting away and is in a world of his own now. I mean, Sebastian Vettel, his teammate, qualified very poorly, so it's really just a case of him as a singular driver doing a fantastic job, and he's just dominating this Grand Prix so far. What he needs to do, of course, having lost some points in the championship to myself and Giovinazzi, whilst both of us squabble over P4 and 5, he's, just getting clear, so that might be quite crucial indeed for the next and last round of this season. Meanwhile, behind us and behind Wehrlein, as we saw earlier, the 2 Mercedes of Russell and Leclerc fighting hard against the Ferrari of Schumacher, and also in the background you can see the second Jaguar of Alexander Albon, and then behind them is Sebastian Vettel ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who I believe it looks like there has some damage on his front wing. So Ricciardo was really poor anyway in terms of pace-wise on Saturday, but clearly getting no luck at his home Grand Prix then. Obviously F1 can be quite cruel at times, and sometimes that fantasy kind of fairy tale of doing well at your home race just never pays out, as we continue to watch this massive fight between Van Dorn and Gasly. So great to watch, and as we close close up, though. Giovinazzi, unfortunately, and Verline are sticking with me as Gio really gets it to the inside. They have to squeeze him quite harshly to keep the position there, just about. Verline's also sticking about, though, as well, so all three of us are closing up. So this may become a 5-way fight all the way from P2 down to P6. And great to see, I guess, for Porsche's sake. Obviously, they've had some very bad luck with their race pace and, DNFs and whatnot. Good to see Verline sticking with us and showing the true pace, maybe, of the Porsche car with improvements they've made throughout this entire season, in their debut season, of course, in Formula 1. As we now move on later to lap number 5, we've been watching again Van Dorn v Gasly. He tried it again in turn 1. He's going to try it again in the high-speed section. He goes round the outside. It's a great move, but then a bit of contact made and Van Dorn loses ground then on the exit, and that allows us to come in. Ooh, very, very fine there. Bit of contact made with Van Dorn. I'm actually very surprised we had no damage on the front wing there. I had checked it on the heads-up display briefly on the right-hand side, you saw, just to make sure and double-check there was no front wing damage. Very surprised not to, because I definitely felt some contact on my force feedback on the wheel, but Van Dorn continues to fight Gasly, and every time these guys go side by side, they're just losing more time to me, but I can't quite get my foot in the door quite yet. Maybe now. Van Dorn, for some reason, no DRS there, even though he was the car behind for some reason, so that might invite us in, because we had DRS, and we've been able to just kind of almost drift through on the exit there and get up into P3 of this Grand Prix. So here we are then. Gasly obviously will definitely not have any DRS. There's no one ahead of him by a second. Sainz absolutely dominating this Grand Prix, and we saw previously this season when the Audi gets in clean air, then it's pretty much no one can really do it, and so he's got acres of that. But as we swing through into lap number 7, not too far away from our first pit stop, but we're now going to go for a move with DRS open on Pierre Gasly. Tire on the right there, and as we go into the brake zone, Gasly with a bad lockup, and so it's such fine margins between myself and one of my most famous rivals in this series. And now, though, the way we squeeze out Gasly, Van Dorn has just kind of forced his way through. Now they're side by side yet again in this GP. I think Van Dorn may have just got that. Yes, he has. So Van Dorn is now up into P3s. We're up into P2. So Gasly's lost 2 positions. He might lose a 3rd, because there goes Giovinazzi down the inside. Big lock up again from Gasly, and the 2 Red Bulls nearly make some contact. I think they might have done, actually, because Giovinazzi's slowed up a little bit and is now looking vulnerable from Pascal Wehrlein in the Porsche Formula 1 car. Around the outside, Wehrlein sails, and look at that, mid-corner, squirts the throttle and gets the job done. Giovinazzi, the championship leader, down the order now in what is P6, of course, and Gasly also 2 places down, nearly lost 3 there, so it's not going too well now for the Red Bull guys after initially looking very, very punchy indeed. And Van Dorn, obviously, is looking pretty quick, the man who got pole, so I'm not surprised there, but as he pressurizes us, we actually come in, because I was feeling the tyre wear, and like I said, this was the plan from me. I think the 2-stop is the way to go for us today in terms of, okay, already at this stage, I think you can maybe sort of see that unless there's a safety car, I think Sainz almost is out of the race in terms of what we can do potentially with him. I don't know what he's doing, but the cars around me, if you look historically at previous Australian Grand Prix in the F1 MyDriver series, going aggressive around this circuit has paid out quite a fair bit, so we're going to stick to what we know and go for it, and we've gone early, we've committed early, and so we just have to try and do the best job we can now, because we know we have to make a second pit stop. These tyres won't go the distance for sure pitting this early, and so we're going to close up in the first bit of a challenge. We won't even be trying to overtake our rivals, we'll be trying to get past this traffic here who's yet to pit, and you can see already getting held up massively. I think our teammates are part of this traffic. You got Lundgaard just ahead of us in the Renault. They're trying to battle Ricciardo, and they're going to have a three-way moment here. Sergio Perez on the left there, so it's literally a 3-man blockade. I can't go anywhere. There's no space to work with through that entire sector. Can we try and make a move now as we enter the next one? Going through the right and then the left, we dodge Ricciardo very quickly indeed. Now round the outside, it's a lovely little dance around the outside of Sergio Perez there, but quick thinking on my feet in the cockpit to just nip left-hand side of Ricciardo rather than maintaining that right-hand side line. And so up into P13, can we try and catch up to Lundgaard then and overtake him on the very next lap, but definitely already lost maybe a second there in that first sector, which is a little bit annoying, frustrating, but that's obviously the challenge. We're doing a 2-stop when others are trying a 1-stop or are just kind of, much slower than you and out of sync of your race. So we go very easily past Lundgaard then on the right-hand side, cut back to the racing line, and we push on. Meanwhile, there is Wehrlein just out the pit lane on a set of hard tyres. So Wehrlein definitely going for a 1-stop then, I would say, but you saw Wehrlein wasn't too far away from us, so you can actually see, even though I got held up in that traffic, how much time I've gained on Wehrlein, because that's how much his soft tyres were going off at the end of his stint. So that's why I think the two-stop's going to be so powerful around here. So we go for the move on Alexander Albon, who's yet to pit still. So you can see, you know, Albon was sort of just in the bottom region of the points in the top 12, and I've overtaken him, and he's yet to make his pit stop. So right now the plan is working, because there behind me is Pierre Gasly in the Red Bull, ahead of Verline on the road, and there is then the flash of the Jaguar of Van Dorn. So all these guys are behind me now, and we've got a decent gap to Gasly as well, you know, on track. Now the question is, where is this man going to play out? Giovinazzi, he's yet to make his pit stop. He's coming in now, a whopping 3 or 4 laps after me, and then this man, Carlos Sainz, leads the way. He's already made his pit stop, by the way, so he is literally miles ahead, a good 1 pit stop ahead of us. So Sainz could also do a 2-stop in this race and come out in first. So he is absolutely battering everyone, including myself, to be fair. Lightning pace for him, and I think we might see Sebastian Vettel, his teammate, come through quite well in this race. The Audis are real fired up around here. Street circuit, so you do need some downforce, but of course remember, Audi have been adding downforce to their car the entire season, and they've, you know, got the same engine power they've always had. Giovinazzi's come out considerably behind his teammate Gasly and also Verline in the Porsche, so you can see the tyre wear really did affect the Italian, the championship leader. And also, if you might have noticed, as he came out the pit lane, I think he tapped Van Dorn on the front wing as Van Dorn came in quite awkwardly. So I think Van Dorn now, unfortunately, has damage. So it's all going kind of backwards for the pole man, who did so well on Saturday. So in terms of the way things stand, then it's Carlos Sainz in the lead, then myself in second place. A lot of clean air. Now I just need to try and push as hard as I can until that second pit stop for me for the set of soft tyres. Gasly behind Verline, then you got Giovinazzi, and then for how much longer will be Van Dorn behind the Italian, because he's got that front wing damage, which we noted. You can visibly see on the front wing, and the Mercedes car of Leclerc goes sailing round the outside to the inside for the next right-hander through the high-speed chicane and gets the job done. And the Ferrari of Mick Schumacher also might come knocking. Van Dorn just about placing his car well enough to block the German, but Leclerc is through in the first, and Mercedes cars behind them is the second Mercedes of Russell the Verstappen there. So the two former teammates battling away in their two different cars, and then right behind them is Sebastian Vettel, who's trying to recover in this Grand Prix, and so far is doing a decent job. And if his teammates pace anything to go by, I think Vettel has a very good chance of actually getting through, as long as he doesn't get held up too much by the traffic that's right in front of him, basically, that he's trying to overtake. But as we now cut back on to the fight between Giovinazzi and Verline, it's a massive send from Giovinazzi. Remember, Verline is on hard tyres, Giovinazzi on the medium compounded tyre. Both cars, I believe, though, are trying to go to the end on the one stop here, but the Porsche team feeling like their tyre wear is way too high. So in theory, Giovinazzi should be able to get in very easily in the corners, but in the straight, it's a different story, it would seem. Obviously, the Porsche Works team, you might think they have a slight advantage, because I don't think they would give all the advantage in a straight line to their customer team at Red Bull. So Verline, so far, you can see clearly, is actually keeping him at bay. So this is quite awkward. The championship leader being held back, and maybe his entire, you know, his position in the championship, his position in this race, being held back by the very team that supply him the engine that has allowed him to be in the position he's in the championship. It's all rather a little bit tense here, I'm sure, on the pit wall, but Giovinazzi gets the job done there on the inside. But let's wait for it, because the DRS will open, and there you go. Verline goes for the move. That Porsche is actually looking very quick now. We've said it before, just before in this episode, they've gotten very unlucky as a team not to capitalise on the upgrades they've clearly made in the last few races, especially in terms of when you've looked at where Verline's qualified so many times in the last few races, but they've just had such bad luck and bad race pace. But look at this, Verline's giving a real good show there. He's trying to go around the outside of that right-hander, which is such a hard place to make. You're going side by side, let alone just with you in qualifying on the edge of grip, and he's gone for it again with the dive of the inside there. So the hard tyres versus the mediums, Red Bull Porsche, the Porsche Works car, and they're fighting so much that, look at that, in the background, Leclerc is coming up behind them. They've lost so much time. This is a disaster for the championship leader there. He's nowhere near now the podium positions. He's now going backwards as he's been overtaken by the Mercedes guy. Giovinazzi is just falling away. So this is maybe that sort of drama we were talking about that can happen at Albert Park as he tries to get the place back. He does get the place back round the outside, but as it stands, he's struggling in this race right now, and he's being held up massively by these two cars. And remember, that's going to pay out for me, because if I pit and I come out behind all these guys, the more they fight, the easier my time will be once I make that second pit stop. So this is going to pay dividends for me, but also remember, also Carlos Sainz, he's out in the lead. The further back Giovinazzi goes, the better for him in the championship. So right now, this is the drama that I was mentioning that can happen around here. It is happening. Giovinazzi trying his best. He gets back ahead of Wehrlein, but for how much longer? Because also Mick Schumacher's joining in the party nearly. So we'll come back to that fight, but a brilliant fight from P4 down to P8 that was. We now move back to our POV, lap number 19 then. We've not really seen too much from our second stint because I'll be honest, nothing actually was happening for me in this race. It was just me literally pushing every single lap, trying to get everything I could out of this car, and the tyres now are very much going off. You can see 2 red sectors, not great, even though I'm pushing, they're basically going off now. So as you saw there on the bottom right, we've called into box in this lap. Now in terms of my relative distance to Gasly in P3, the gap was building quite rapidly. In the last 3 laps, I've been gaining about half a second a lap here, but earlier on in the stint, it wasn't gaining enough. Basically, the tyre wear for him was not as bad as I was hoping it to be, and it only just started to really affect things in the last 3 laps here. So, in terms of the gap, I will be behind Gasly, and I will actually be behind that entire gaggle, I think, of Giovinazzi, Wehrlein, and Leclerc. So, this will be a massive arse for me to come back through, but obviously, I committed so early, and I've seen in the past, you know, in previous Australian Grand Prix in F1 MyDriver, I've sometimes made a move on the last corner of the last lap on the fresher tyres. So let's just see how this goes. I'm hoping we get a repeat of Spain maybe. Let's see. But as we move on after our pit stop, this man is making moves as well. Sebastian Vettel down the inside of the Jaguar car, so he's coming through. So Vettel's had a very quiet race. I haven't seen too much of him there, but he's just gone about his business and he's done the job, and he's now just behind George Russell, who finds himself down the road from myself, catching up to that gaggle I talked about of Schumacher, Wehrlein, Giovinazzi and Leclerc. So for sure, there's a guaranteed chance of getting up into P3 if we can just make the passes, and then it's a question mark of if I have enough pace in the tyres to go and chase after Gasly, because like I said, we didn't build much of a gap that I was hoping for in that second stint, but we've committed now. We've got to get the job done, at least maximise the situation we're in right now as it stands in P7, looking to get back up into P3, purple our sector. And so it's just a question of where can we make the moves and trying to get it done. It can be quite tight around here, obviously a street circuit, remember, around Albert Park, as we get very close to Wehrlein's rear end there, and we've somehow managed to force a move when I didn't even think about making a move. I wasn't actually preparing for an overtake on the outside there, but Wehrlein was going so slow that I had to avoid him, go half on the grass, and just slow the thing down just in time on the right-hander, and we got the job done actually in the end. So Wehrlein let me force the move there, as we now see Leclerc sending one to the inside of Giovinazzi, those two side by side, Schumacher just watching on. It might become 3 wide here, and once again I'm kind of met with a roadblock of Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull this time. We're going to go down the inside of Schumacher, who does lift off before the chicane. Leclerc's been squeezed out by Giovinazzi on the exit though, not the best one, open DRS, but Schumacher comes back at me here. He's on the inside, we have to try and squeeze him to make sure we maintain the P5, and ahead of us whilst we do that, it's another great scrap going on between Giovinazzi and Leclerc. I assume it's been going on for a while now, if these guys are all so close. You know, there's only so much action we can show you in one episode, so I'm sure this will be going on pretty much every single lap since we first started watching this in the second stint for everyone here. But now it's our time to maybe try and do something as we go a little bit defensive on Schumacher, as he's actually keeping up with us quite closely behind in a straight line. But ahead of us, Giovinazzi and Leclerc are scrapping away so much still that surely at some point can we make a move somewhere to the inside maybe of Leclerc here. No, he's gone down the inside of Giovinazzi, but we're also defending against Schumacher. But now Leclerc is slow. We're now down the inside of him, and we have made the move up into P4. Didn't expect that to work really as we entered that kind of portion of the circuit, because it looked like Leclerc and Giovinazzi were going to be a mobile chicane roadblock there, but we've made it work somehow, and we're now up into P4, so one more position to go, and then we'll be maximising that P3. But you know, with only 5 laps to go now on lap 24, I just don't think we can grab Gasly. I think he's actually too far ahead of us unfortunately there, so the 2-stop in the end of it has not worked out as supremely as I hoped it would. But here we go for the move round the outside of our championship rival Antonio Giovinazzi, the championship leader going into this race. Don't think so anymore as we overtake him, and remember Sainz is out there in first place, but purple first sector, very quick indeed, but then slowing down because here Giovinazzi is now going round the outside, has a look, doesn't quite get it, but red second sector, as obviously the fighting slows us down, and that's going to hinder us at any chance of closing up to Gasly. And also remember, by this point my tyres now are 6 laps old, and remember I picked after 8 laps at the start of this race, so my soft tyres are already starting to wear off. That's how high the tyre wear is on the soft tyres at least, so I just don't know if we can get Gasly. I think that may be a bit little bit too difficult. Meanwhile, we are now looking at a fight behind us between, well, this is Vettel essentially surging through the pack. He's overtaken Schumacher. He's now gone round the outside of Wehrlein, that is, in the Porsche. And now he's got the two Mercedes cars fighting ahead of him of Russell and Leclerc. And so Vettel could carve his way up into, and that's a maximum P5 position here, which would be an insane recovery from the German, just showing how strong the Audi car, I guess, is in race conditions around Albert Park as he goes for the move down the inside and think he's done it. Yes, he has. Sebastian Vettel, oh, not quite. He tried to make the double pass. He then got forced out wide there by the two Mercedes cars, so he nearly did it. He nearly made a bonkers double overtake dive bomb down the inside. Instead, gets the move done on one of the Mercedes cars of Leclerc, I believe that is, through the last corner, who I think Leclerc's going slow for some reason. I think he may have damage on the front wing. So Vettel now up into P6. It's Russell in P5 ahead. And oh my god, they've just tried to make that 4 wide into turn 1. Schumacher, Leclerc, Albon and Wehrlein trying the impossible, and they nearly pulled it off there if it weren't for Wehrlein having to back out of that. But now Schumacher that leads that 4-way fight ahead of Albon and Leclerc, and Wehrlein going backwards now in this race with I don't know, damage or some sort of he's just very slow right now in this Grand Prix. And meanwhile we cut back to the action ahead. Sebastian Vettel right now bidding to try and get up into P5 with a brilliant recovery. And remember, we talked a lot about maybe the implications of this race for the Drivers' Championship, but this is quite important for the Constructors because it's all still in the balance. Anyone could still win it, McLaren, Red Bull or Audi, and right now Vettel's doing a great job to recover from a poor qualifying and make sure he's doing his bit to help out his team in the Constructors fight, because remember, Ricciardo's been nowhere in this race. I don't know where he is, so I'm kind of the only one flying the flag for major points today from McLaren. Both Red Bulls are in the top 4, and now you've got both Audis, well, nearly in the top 5. Vettel was ahead, but that Mercedes car is actually not too bad in a straight line there, and he's actually re-overtaken, has George Russell. So let's see on to the next lap. Can Vettel get that nailed down? But the Audi is trying to make it 2 Audis in the top 5. So as it stands, things may be looking a little bit gloomy for my team at McLaren in terms of the Constructors going into that final race. We'll have to see what the final tally is like as we now watch on, and Leclerc there with clearly some damage on the front wing, you can see there, because there was no end plate there on his car, and so he's struggling to try and keep Albon at bay. And meanwhile ahead, Vettel has finally got the job done, and I think he's actually finally finished that move off, because I think that's kind of almost the last place the Mercedes car would look to try and re-overtake him. But ahead of him, of course, then is Giovinazzi, and you can see I am building a gap to Gio in the last kind of 2 laps only. It's a pretty decent gap I built in only 2 laps, but the thing is here, that's where Pierre Gasly is so far ahead, and then this is where Carlos Sainz is. He's looking to lap Max Verstappen in the Ferrari there. Verstappen gets blue flags for the 2nd time this season in a Grand Prix. Absolutely astounding stuff. And now we move on to the last few stages of this GP. I believe this is the 2nd last lap of the Grand Prix. And Ricciardo, we spoke about where he was. Well, here he is now. He's announcing himself. I don't know where he's come from. I kind of almost want to say he's actually done a 2-stop, and he did soft, medium, because we haven't seen anything of him in this race ever since that damage he had in the first stint. But he's come through to overtake Leclerc, who's obviously limping home with damage of his own on the front wing. But Ricciardo, with a fixed car now, is waltzing past the Porsche as well of Wehrlein, who's just gone backwards in this race. So much so that he's now behind his teammate Lando Norris, who is currently the lead Porsche, just ahead of the Ferrari of Mick Schumacher. So everything's really kicked off in this last stage of the Grand Prix, and it just continues to surprise me, as you can see clearly in front of your eyes. Wehrlein comes back at Ricciardo in a straight line. So Wehrlein just so quick in the straights, but just has nothing left in the tyres, I guess, in the corners. And Schumacher's been overtaken by Lando Norris, and I think Schumacher's also got some damage. So it's been a very chaotic and a very unclean Australian Grand Prix, I guess. Like I mentioned, it's a very tight circuit, actually. It is a street circuit, remember, so it can be quite difficult to keep things clean whilst you're racing side by side so fiercely as everyone is in this grid. And now we watch on with Albon trying to make a pass, and oh my god, what a dive bomb that is from Alexander Albon. He faked left, went right, and he just absolutely went for it. And he's got the job done in one go. He's up into P6. He's just absolutely mugged off George Russell, the Mercedes car. Albon, his first season ever in F1 MyDriver, in Formula 1 here in this universe we've created. And Albon, he's an absolute star. He's the leading Jaguar driver in the standings, remember. I know Van Dorn's got very unlucky, but to be fair, Albon's had some fantastic drives. But yeah, he's in up into P6. Vettel P5. P5, Giovinazzi P4, myself P3, this man Gasly in P2, but the man who's reigned supreme this entire race has just crossed the line there. That's how far ahead of he is. Carlos Sainz has won the Australian Grand Prix, his second win of this season, and that has put him right back into the hunt of the championship fully, like he was still mathematically in it, but now that's done wonders for him, I'm sure, as we'll have to see the full standings after the race is finished, but he has dominated this one. No one could touch him at all. Wind down under here at the second last race as we swing through the last corner behind Pierre Gasly for P3 at the podium, and we'll just have to take it. To be honest, it's been a tough old race. We tried the two-stop, didn't fully work out for us, but it's still a decent showing to obviously beat out Giovinazzi and outscore him, who we're only 1 point behind in the championship, remember. So outscoring him is still a job well done, but here are your full race results then. So outside that top 6 we knew of, Russell did finish up in P7 ahead of Norris, Schumacher, Ricciardo did get up into the P10 position eventually, so actually quite a good recovery to say that he was pretty much nowhere earlier on, so he's got 4 points for McLaren, which could be quite crucial because it has been that close in the Constructors as well as the Drivers' Championship. So those 4 points could make the difference. So fair plays, GG's to Ricciardo. And then to round out the points, Verline and then Leclerc in P12. A shame for both Renaults. You can see there at the bottom of the standings here. Double DNF. They looked so strong earlier on in the race. They brought more upgrades and they both failed to finish the race today. So that's just the harsh reality of Formula 1 sometimes. Then you can see with everyone else rapidly, trying to push each other to improve. The likes of BMW have really fallen away at the very end of this season, and they scored no points as well, along with the Aston Martin guys, as well as Verstappen and Van Dorn, who had damage, of course, in that second part of the race. But this is what that win for Sainz and that third and fourth for me and Giovinazzi mean, respectively, for the championship. As we go towards, then, the final race of F1 MyDriver, we've got the lead in the Drivers' Championship for this season by 1 point to Carlos Sainz, who is 1 point ahead of Antonio Giovinazzi. The top 3 drivers for this championship fight are covered by 2 points. That is it. That is so nerve-wracking. It's going to be such a tense finale next time out at Brazil, of all places. That place always turns up. There's no guarantee what happens in Brazil. There could be rain, there could be, just contact, spins, thrills, crashes. There's been all sorts in F1 MyDriver, let alone real-life Formula 1 at Brazil. So that is going to be quite something and quite a fitting championship finale of this entire series. Albon in a commanding P4 now. Gasly jumps up into P5. So look at that. Gasly, a great recovery in this season, to be fair, in the last 2-3 races to kind of turn his season around and come out the top 12, to come out the bottom 8 drivers on this grid up into the top 5. That's actually pretty mega in terms of recovery of points there, ahead of Ricciardo, Schumacher, Van Dorn, Vettel, Leclerc, Perez, and then Verline. In terms of the constructors, I did say every point could count, because going to the final round, McLaren are first place, but we are level on points with Red Bull Porsche for second place there, 238 both of us, and then Audi with 227. So the Constructors' Championship is also wide open for those 3 teams there. So it's going to be a 3-way battle in both senses. But that was a really fun Grand Prix, and that has set up a great finale. So guys, if you did enjoy that one, then be sure to hit that like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. When you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula content. Like I said, remember the finale episode, guys, will be coming out on Friday this week, not the usual Thursday. The series has gone out on Friday. Hopefully it's 7 p.m. It could be a little bit later than that UK time, but hopefully Friday 7 p.m. That is the finale. Till then, guys, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. Goodbye.